Stand Up.
And now, Stand Up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to stand up with Pete Dominick on vacay.
Thank you, Pete Co., and thank you for listening today. It's a Stand Up with Pete Dominick LITE. Each day I'll be posting an interview with one very special guest this week. Thank you for listening. Today's guest is pretty much my best friend in the whole world. We talk every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day, using the Marco Polo app, which he actually introduced me to over almost 2 years ago now. And he lives in Australia. And we met years ago. You'll hear all the details here in the opening. I do the intro with him present, which I almost never do, and because he was sitting there in front of the piano and started playing. So also the first 5 minutes are there's a little bit of static because of his AirPods, but then he takes them out and it sounds much better. Not at all a problem, though. So my conversation with David Campbell is one of the most famous people in Australia. He is the co-host of the equivalent of the Today Show in Australia. He's a singer, songwriter. He's got a new album come out. He's written children's books. Married with 3 young kids. He just turned 48, and he is my very special guest on today's episode of Stand Up, and I think you're really going to like our conversation. Here we go. Can you keep playing the piano while I do your intro for your own intro?
Sure.
Well, folks, this is the first time I've ever had any guest play his own intro music. But this isn't just any guest. This is a very special guest. This is one of my oldest and now my closest friend. We met in our early 20s, in the late 90s, early aughts. Is that what you say, aughts? And he was pursuing his career. He was performing at the hottest cabaret venues in New York City, as well as on Broadway. He had already won awards in Australia's equivalent of Broadway, because that's where he's from, Australia. Anyway, we palled around, we became close friends, and then he abandoned me. He left me. He moved back to Oz. He continued his career, putting out new albums, performing in other amazing shows, winning awards, and then getting a coveted gig as a morning show host on one of the top network morning shows. He's the co-host of the Today Show. He's an award-winning performer, musician, artist, and he's got a brand new album coming out, and he's my life partner. Ladies and gentlemen, David Campbell, everybody. Yeah!
How are you, man?
Happy birthday. Also, it's his birthday.
Yay! I'm 48 years old.
48. Cool. I'm 45, and we met when we were in our early 20s. You're 2 years older than me. Earlier?
Yeah, we did. We were just pups. We were just babes. We had no money. We would sit around drinking coffee and telling jokes to each other. That was it.
And why were you in New York City? Why did you move to New York City?
I moved to New York because I was doing cabaret at the time. I'd done some theater in Australia. I was in Les Miserables, and I had some opportunities to sort of do some cabaret downtown in New York at a place that's no longer there called 88. In fact, you said a lot of cabaret venues, you can say it's no longer there. It's a good preface for the sentence. It's a place called 88's down in the Village, down on West 4th Street. And I sort of did some gigs there, and I did a thing called the Cabaret Convention, which used to be at the Town Hall at New York, which I don't know if they still do it there or not. And I just, I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks, and then I got an agent, and they're like, come back and get a green card and do all that sort of stuff. So I left and came back, and that's when we met.
Oh, got it. And then how long did we pal around for? A year?
Oh, no, about 2 or 3 years.
Oh, really? That long? Yeah. I don't know. I just remembered the heartbreak, the loss.
I know.
We palled around for a couple of years, like closest friend in New York City for sure, and a new friend, like not somebody, and somebody I finally clicked with, and we just did all kinds of bullshit together. We went to arcades. And we never really drank or chased girls, though. Really.
No, we weren't. It wasn't that sort of. It was pre-Entourage, so it wasn't really that sort of culture. And we were sort of nerdy. It was kind of like there would have been. I don't know if there would have been a point if we'd been chasing girls. I mean, we were kind of the losers at the ball.
Yeah, there's some truth. There's a lot of truth to that. But then you did a show on Broadway in New York, and then you just skilly dat out of there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a lot of crisis. I had a kind of what I realize now was the beginning of a lot of panic attacks, a lot of anxiety, a lot of like trying to medicate that and just coming off medication and going back on like Zoloft and Xanax and stuff like that. It just really messed me up, and I did not know what was happening. And I now know in retrospect that's what it was. I know in retrospect I can acknowledge that, oh, okay, that's what was happening then, because I felt like I was freeballing.
I didn't know that you were having any kind of issues with anything or you're taking anything. I never knew any of that, but I just knew that you left, and then we kind of lost touch for a while. And what happened to you then? You got into, when did you start heavily drinking?
Oh, probably I was starting around 2003, 2004. No, actually, no. When I was doing Shout, I was starting to really sort of get into like a sort of binge drinking culture that was happening. That happens a lot in Australia and a lot of other countries, like us. Yeah. We have very sort of English, Irish background based cultures, and it just was becoming habitual.
I want to get into that a little bit more, but your origin story is really one of the most fascinating, original, and tragic in many ways stories. You've talked about it your entire career openly, and so I haven't given it away yet. So tell me a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up in Australia.
Well, I was born in Adelaide in South Australia, and my mother and father were both...
I'm sorry, do you know Mike?
In Adelaide?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike C or Mike D?
D.
Yeah, I know Mike D.
He's
the big
cool.
D. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
And so I was born, my mother and father were extremely young when I was born. So they were both 17 when I was born. They were friends. It was a product of friends fooling around one night and oops. And then so I was going to be adopted out, and my mother's mother adopted me. And so she raised me as a son, but sort of did it back in those days. It was like you either sent the daughter away to a farm and you came back with a cousin or something, or they were adopted out. So it's quite common. And so I was brought up thinking that my mother was my sister and that my grandmother was my mother. And she raised me.
Hold on a second there. Just let that marinate. You've told the story so many times, you realize that's a bit shocking.
Yeah.
You were raised by your grandmother thinking that she was your mom and that your sister, that your mom was your sister.
Yeah. And I knew, because my grandmother was adopted, so I knew from quite an early age, like 7 or 8, that I was adopted into the family and that was something special. So that was a positive that she sort of had seeded before that. So I could then, as you're going to school and you realize that your mum is older than the other mums at the school gate, you realize why that is. So that wasn't as much of a shock. It was when I found out that my dad was one of the country's biggest rock and roll stars, possibly now ever, that it became revealed itself to me who was who in my family and how complicated that was going to be from then on.
You didn't know how complicated it was going to be from then on, though. You didn't know.
Not at 10. No, I didn't realize at 10. I realize now. At 48.
It would be like the equivalent would be like an American kid doesn't know who his dad is, and then when he's 10 years old, he finds out his dad is Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, 100%, exactly the same.
But who did you think your dad was up until then?
I didn't know, and wasn't really.
Weren't you Obama? Weren't you Obama-like searching?
No, no. You're 8 years old. You're 10 years old. You're playing with Star Wars figures and reading comic books. I mean, I sort of. You compartmentalize as kids. You just go, what's in front of me? This is cool. So I didn't really know, but I found it all out on one day, and I remember that day really clearly. So, and it was probably more painful finding out about. It wasn't a shock about my dad. I mean, there's a shock later on about my dad. There are shock waves and ramifications throughout my career about how I felt and how I deal with that, including the anxiety I felt in New York with you. around the time that I knew you. But the biggest shock at that time was dealing with the fact that, you know, this woman sitting in front of me now is not my mother. This woman across who I thought my sister is my mother, and she's not coping with me finding out this information in front of her. And it was really traumatic. It was a really traumatic reveal. It wasn't a huge conflict, but there was a lot of secrets that were just being thrown at a 10-year-old boy.
You can understand how that would be dramatic, but you can also imagine that it is the coolest thing in the world that your father, you find out that your dad is one of the most famous musicians. Did we say his name? Jimmy Barnes, Cold Chisel, the band. Yeah,
Jimmy Barnes.
And so what did you then, like, when did you meet him for the first time? And, you know, what did you think when you found out that this guy, you knew of him in his work, right?
Oh, yeah. We all knew who he was. So he came from the same area that my mother came from. So he's from Glasgow in Scotland, and they're from England. And there was a thing in the 50s and 60s in Australia where they repatriated a lot of English people, and they called them 10-pound poms. And they'd bring the whole family up for 10 pounds, and they would live in certain areas. And this is one area that, you know, repatriated a whole bunch of English people. And so they all knew each other. So when we, you know, growing up, when he was on TV, it was like, oh, well, we know him. He used to live down the road from us, and so it's okay. He's a normal guy, but he wasn't a normal guy. He was, you know, one of the biggest, you know, hardest rock and roll stars that we'd ever produced. So it was up there with, like, you know, when you're at school, not really wanting to tell your friends because I was kind of scared of the information, of letting it get out for a long time.
Why?
I sort of opened the door a little bit and realized a lot of kids and a lot of people in my family wanted me as a 10-year-old to go, what are we doing now? So when I sat down, I remember another member of my family who's now dead, you know, sort of caught up and said, oh, I guess you're going to call me such and such now. And I was like, I don't want anything to change. And people kept, like, putting it back onto me. I was 10 years old. Like, well, what do you want to do now? I mean, am I going to be your mother? Am I going to be a what would you like us to do? And what is she going to be? And what is he going to be? And I'm like, my face is melting. I don't know what to do. I can't cry because they're all crying. What do you want me to say right now? So opening the door of, like, letting my dad and his career into, I guess, my friend circle and I guess my social groups, I was too scared. So I kept everything then a secret until probably high school when I started to trust some friends.
When did you meet your dad for the first time?
I met him the week before I found out he was my dad.
Why?
Because he'd heard that my grandmother remarried, which is why I have the last name Campbell. My grandmother married a guy called Peter Campbell, and he has no consequence in my life whatsoever. He's a good guy, but they didn't last very long, and I kept that name because that was the name I grew up with. I mean, I was born, you know, with David Smith. I became David Campbell, and that was my name. So I was, you know, I'm getting to be a teenager, and people are like, maybe you should take the last name Barnes. Maybe you should call me Grandma. It was like, no, guys, I don't want to do any of this. I'm about to get acne. I don't want any of this shit.
What superhero or fictional character do you most identify with as a result of your origin story?
A combination of Luke Skywalker, I think. And I wish, and the geekiness of Peter Parker.
So you meet your dad that first time, not knowing he's your dad, and how does that? What's that hangout like? What did you do?
Oh, well, I was there for a week with my grandmother. I think she was there to sort of check out how wild he was. But by that stage, he's married to my stepmother Jane. They have my sister Mahalia. She's, you know, maybe 12, 18 months of age. So she and I are still probably the closest of all of my brothers and sisters. I mean, we're all quite close, but we have the longest relationship. So, you know, I think my grandmother was like, oh, well, he's not the wild man of rock and roll. Also, she thought, he seems like he's settled down, had a family, so this is fine. You can have access to your child now. I mean, it's complicated.
Did he want access to you?
100%. He never, I mean, he wrote about this in his book. He wrote a book about his life. His past was very traumatic. He came from a very poor background. There was a lot of abuse. He's written all about this in his book. And he talks about it in the book, saying, you know, he wanted to stay in touch with me, but also he was off making rock and roll and having a career in his 20s and didn't know how to communicate and didn't know what to do. And my grandmother, being a very strong woman, just sort of kept me at a distance and sort of shut me out of all of that. And I think when he got married, he didn't even tell Jane straight away that he had a son. And so she found a picture in his wallet and was like, what's going on here? And he was like, oh yeah, that's my other son. That's my son. and kudos to her. This is why I'm in the family, and probably why I'm so accustomed to change and how to cope with certain levels of change, that Jane was straight up, we need to contact him. He needs to be part of our family. She didn't freak out. She didn't go, you've had a life before me. What? She was like, what? Where is he? Let's get him. He has a sister now. Let's go.
Usually when you're keeping a secret, it's like of an affair. It's like, oh my God, who's this picture? Is this the woman he's having? Who's this boy? Who's this little boy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's my son.
She's like, I can't believe someone's walking around and we don't know. We need to have him in our life. So it was great. And that was very, very important. And as the years went on, if she hadn't established that and he hadn't established that, it would have been a much different path, I think, for me. So
you're very grateful to Jane, your stepmother, for that.
100%. She's a very healing, intelligent, incredible woman. She really leads our family. She's quite the matriarch.
If I knew you were going to lean on that 100% thing so much, I probably would have canceled this ahead of time.
100,000%? Do you want me to do more?
No, we talk I never have heard you say 100%. But I'm usually
really? You didn't like that?
It's very Jon Stewart.
Is it?
I don't know. So were you already a musician? I feel like you were already playing guitar and singing before you knew who your dad was. You were already interested in music. You're like...
I was definitely interested in music. Yeah, I definitely sang in my bedroom and did all that sort of stuff. I didn't play guitar until I was in my teens, but I definitely sang a lot more. But I think once I found out about who my dad was, and that just really opened the door up to the possibility of you can leave your home,
right,
make money in arts, and possibly have a career singing. And people sort of liked me singing. They liked me singing in high school. It was something that I was naturally good at.
Well, yeah, the thing that's so I think the most interesting thing, or maybe it's not at all interesting, maybe it's genetic or something, but like your dad has this iconic voice. And you have a much different voice. I think you have a better voice. I don't know anything about music, but I think you have a better range and a better voice. And yet the point is, you have an exceptional voice. You're very highly respected because of how good you can sing, your range. We talked earlier about cabaret and Broadway, and of course rock and roll. You can do that all. But isn't it weird that you're potentially even more talented than your dad, or you have a better or as good as voice that you can sing just like him? I mean, isn't that...
No, I think it's subjective. I think it's completely different. He's got a really soulful,
subjective,
rich
fine, but
voice.
Fine. The fact that you're a great singer and your dad's a great singer is pretty interesting.
It is interesting, but it's also, you've got to remember that I'm one of multiple members of my family who are extraordinary singers. Like, I think my sister is one of the greatest singers in this country.
Oh, wow.
I've got my brother who's a great singer and a great drummer. I've got another sister who does cabaret as well, and she's a great singer. Another sister who is, in a folk, she sings backing vocals for Crowded House. So we are a family of singers. I've just taken this really left turn to sort of Broadway theatre, more trained, whereas they're more soulful and instinctive, and I think that both camps are really good.
So what role did he play in your life from, say, 10 to 20? Like, was he in your life? Was he there and gone? And at what point did you, first go to an arena show with him as your son? And then at what point did you go on stage with him in front of thousands and thousands of screaming fans in auditoriums and arenas and sing along with him?
He was in and out of my life as a teenager, and it was very problematic. He and my grandmother's a very strong woman, and it was a very fractious relationship. It wasn't natural. She was an older woman. She raised me. She was a war baby from World War II. She had certain ways. She'd been through her own journey. It was a very, and she had these two younger, more progressive people trying to instill their, beliefs and their systems on a child that she's raising. So that was really complicated. So my dad, a lot of time, would back off, and so would Jane. They'd be like, this is getting too hard. I was obviously experiencing a lot of stress, and they were seeing that. But then other times, I'd go on holidays with them. I mean, the first time I went overseas, was when I was 16 or 15 and went to Thailand with them because Jane's half Thai. Jane is Thai. All my brothers and sisters are half Thai. So we would go to Thailand on holiday. So that was like, so I would start to see parts of the world. And as for being on stage, I mean, I started going to gigs. I mean, he was massive. I started going to gigs of his in my mid-teens. I probably first went on stage and sang backing vocals in a song he did maybe when I was 16. But it's a loud show. He's a loud singer. The stage is very loud. I found it very confronting. So, and I think it's part of the complication that I've always felt in my life and my career of trying to find my own voice and not like wanting to be in his orbit.
Yeah.
But also that distance that I have with my grandmother probably is still in me somehow trying to find my own path. And that's probably, ironically, stand me in good stead with my career. Emotionally, it's been different.
Getting back to when you moved back from New York and started hanging out like more with your dad, socializing, and started getting into a lot more to alcohol, to drugs. How long did that go for? What was that like to get plastered with your rock star dad?
He was highly addicted by the time I came back. He was probably at the worst we'd ever seen. He writes about it in his book. He would party for days on end. I mean, it was proper life, but he had kids. Grown kids by this stage, they're in their teens, so he went through a really, really bad stage. I then pulled away from him for a long time and sort of tried to, really find myself and find my, because I realized that was really damaging. And I was different to my brothers and sisters who were living it day by day. I found it like super confronting. But then I would go off with my own band and would just binge drink after a show, drink all night, and then pass out, wake up and, go to the next town and do a gig. So I'd learned this sort of really bad habit of like that I needed to address. And it wasn't something that, Lisa, my wife and I often talked about alcoholism and what it means to us and knowing that we are raised by, I certainly am raised by addicts. And once I started having kids, I had Leo. By that stage, I wasn't even drinking that much, but, you'd go to an event and you'd get plastered with people. It's arts, it's TV, it's music. That's kind of what happens. They ply you with free booze and then they take photos of you falling out and then they sell it to magazines. That sort of stuff. That didn't happen to me, but that's the cycle. And I realized that I didn't want to repeat that cycle with my own child. I didn't want my own children to see what I saw growing up. I didn't want them to see what my brothers and sisters saw growing up. So that became a real, I make this decision now or I don't make it at all.
I could talk to you about that phase in your life for a long time, but we don't have forever. And I want to get to you meeting your wife because you and your wife meet. She's British, amazing human being, one of the best people ever. Like I imagine anybody who knows your wife, okay, this is, there's no possible way there's anybody else out there that's going to be better for me. You'd already had several, serious relationships with women, so you knew, what it was like and what you wanted. And then there's a phase where both of you are drinking. I guess what I'm trying to get to is the fact that one of the most interesting things is that both you and your wife quit drinking and became vegans and are raising 3 kids, your older son and now your twins as well. And what are the ages? 10 and the twins are, Leo's 10 now?
11 and 6.5.
And Leo's 11, and your son and daughter are twins, are 6.5, and they are their names are Billy and Betty, which it seems that you and your wife named your kids names that would make you guys laugh. Is that what this is? Is there a significance to you naming your twins Billy and Betty?
No, they're Elizabeth and William. So there's long there. So what we knew when we first got pregnant with Leo, we went through, you go through names that you like. And we really like the name Pearl. Because I think that's on my side there's a Pearl and then maybe on Lisa's side too. Anyway, we like the name Pearl for girls. We always liked Leo. So Leo was always Leo. And then when we were having our children, our twins, we thought about Pearl. We had a Scottish nanny that looked after Leo a couple of days a week with us. And then I realized, because all my family is Scottish too, on my dad's side, I realized that Pearl was going to quickly become Peril. I thought, that's not nice. Peril is not nice. So we thought, let's shift that back to Betty, because we also quite liked Elizabeth and Betty. And then Billy came out because of Lisa has family in America, as you know. I think you probably met some of them sometime at a gig or something when I was there. They live up in Bucks County. They're amazing people. She's got this amazing, like, cousins, male cousins that are like brothers to her. She's an only child. And their father was this incredible, big, burly state police officer named Bill. And he had, from the time I met him to the time he passed away, he suffered really badly from several cancers and fought it and was just this amazing guy, beautiful, beautiful guy. And so when we were pregnant, we knew we were going to lose him. And so we called him and said, hey, we'd like to name our other kid Bill after you. And so Billy and Betty it was just that. It became a thing. And now it's like, they don't, sometimes the teacher will say, William is, and he's like, I don't know who William is. Who's William?
Are there proper legal names, William and Elizabeth?
Yeah. So Billy and Betty are short for those. And it has a little English twinge to it too, because, Betty and, my grandmother on my dad's side's name was Betty, or a great-grandmother's called Betty, and he loved her. So there's a lot of little links there.
Is Lisa English or British?
She's British, yeah. She's from England, yeah. She's from the north. She's very proper. It's like living with a member of the royal family. It's beautiful.
I kind of fast forward through it, but she's amazing. I almost wanted to make a cameo. But tell us when you met. How did you meet her, and when did you know?
I was doing a show in Melbourne called the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which is a Broadway show, and it was a really fun, interactive show with a whole bunch of kids. And she was doing a show called An Inspector Calls, which was directed by Stephen Daldry, who directed The Hours and was instrumental in starting The Crown. And so she had gotten out of a relationship as well, a long-term relationship, and she was a hugely successful actor in England. She was doing roles in the West End and, starring in Europe in shows. And so she had this really burgeoning career, and she just was like, had a bad breakup. Her agent said, hey, do you want to go to Australia? It's only understudy, but it's this great director. And she was like, I'm out of here. And so I was still, at that time, I was still drinking, and a friend of mine, Bert, who I'm still good friends with, we were sharing a dressing room, and we would host these big drinking nights where all the actors would come in. And so we would host ours. And one night, the star of our show, who is a big TV star in Australia and in England, she met the stars of the other show and said, oh, we've got these two kids, we should really hook them up. And so we were set up. And so I met her that night, and we spent 3 weeks together while she was still on tour. And then she went back to England, but she went via Sri Lanka and Singapore to see friends. And I just remember thinking, I don't think I want to stop talking to her or not be around her. And I mean, obviously she's beautiful and I find her so attractive and all that sort of stuff, but also we got along. She was, as you know, with my wife, she knows all our jokes. She knows all the pop culture references. She is hilarious in her own right. Yeah. She's smart. She's, urbane. She's articulate. She's got such an analysis. I just loved being, I would be in her company like this, just listening to her talk. And, I'm sure somewhere deep down in my working class ways, the accent of talking down to me like a British woman, that's probably a thing.
Yeah, you've confessed that in the past that you find the British accent very attractive. But I was like, who doesn't really? It's not like it's German. No offense, but
no offense to the Germans. They do really well. That's good.
Yeah, she's one of the funniest. I almost said woman. She's one of the funniest people that 100%. Her wit is preposterous. And so what? I've always wondered. You're a great looking guy and a successful guy, but do you know what she saw in you?
No. Mm-hmm. Not at all. And still to this day, I know I'm punching above my weight, even though I hate people that say that. Yeah. I think I know what I bring to the table, but because of my own neuroses and insecurities and anxieties, I'm like, why would you? I'm hearing tap shoes down my hallway, people wondering what that background is. That's my kids are doing dance lessons. But look, I think that I make her laugh every day. I remember early on making her laugh all the time. And I remember saying to her, one, I think you're going to make a great mother. And I could see our kids looking at her face. And I thought, that's the face I want my kids to see as they're growing up. And two, I love her laugh. She has the biggest laugh, and you can hear it in theaters, you can hear it on a phone conversation 2 miles away. It's just the great. So for me, I just make her laugh every day, and then I can keep her.
So when do you guys stop drinking? Why?
I stopped drinking, and this is the only name drop I'll do. Dan Aykroyd came on our show.
Go ahead.
And he had that Crystal Skull vodka. And it was really cool. And he was a really, he's Dan Aykroyd. He's bizarre. He's a UFO conspiracy theorist, highly intelligent, amazing guy, a Ghostbuster. And he was really generous. And I got to sing with him. And then we went to this event for Crystal Head where I got up on stage and sang with him. And after that, I'd been doing this TV show for a couple of years, and Leo was really young. And we were going on what would be our first proper holiday with Leo as a young family. And Lisa and I, it was like Friday night. I just finished my shift that morning. And we were like, should we watch Ghostbusters and have a sip of this Crystal Head vodka? I was like, let's do it. So we cracked it up, didn't even drink that much. And had maybe a couple of glasses, went to bed to get up to go to our holiday the next day at the airport. And I was sick as a dog. I could not stop being sick. I could not stop. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to get on this flight. And Lisa had to sort of juggle our seats around so we're going to be fine. And we got to the airport, and in the car on the way to the airport, I heard Leo say, "Oh, Daddy's not well." And I remember growing up seeing people not well. I remember, I certainly as a teenager and as an adult seeing my dad not well, but also as a young kid in Adelaide. I grew up with a lot of alcohol around me, probably a lot of drug abuse if I think about it, domestic violence. I remember those memories. I remember what they feel like in my bones. And I did not. I always, you and I talk about this a lot privately, but I always believe you've got to model what you want your kids to see and be. And I thought, I don't want this. I don't want to be someone's like, well, that's just me. I'm like that. That was fine enough for me growing up. It chilled me to the bone. We landed. I slept on the plane, felt better. We landed. We had lunch. I turned to Lisa and I said, I'm out. I'm not drinking anymore. And I know I wasn't an addict because I could make that decision and not have withdrawals or go to AA or do any of that. So I just went, I'm done. I don't want him to see this. I don't want this to be a part of his life or our life. I'm out. I said, you can keep drinking. I love you. I'm not going to impart anything of myself onto you, but this is my decision. And she was 100% supportive. And I think she drank for a few more weeks and had wine at dinner. And then she just went, she had her own mother had issues with alcohol. And she just went, I'm in with you. Let's go. And so she stopped a month later, and we've never, ever regretted the decision. It has been like a relief. Like my shoulders could relax. I didn't have to be the life of the party anymore. I always just think, okay, I'll steel myself to have a drink and I'll be the life of the party and everyone will like me. Or I can lead my band onto stage or everyone thinks oh, he's like a rat packer. And I really, in retrospect, people are paying money to see me. They don't want to see me drunk on stage. That's their hard-earned dollars. I need to respect them as well as myself. And so all these things fell into place. I was like, oh, this is so good. And now that we had twins, having a kid and having a hangover, most parents know is horrible. Yeah. But when you add multiples to that, it's the worst. So I'm so glad that wasn't even an option.
When you guys both stopped drinking, do you have any friends?
A lot of our friends were like, oh, but you were our favorite drinkers. I'm like, yeah, we know. Because we were the ones.
Sure.
I literally, we renovated an old apartment that we lived in. I built a bar. Just a little nook.
You built it?
I built it.
You built it?
What?
You had a workman.
I paid somebody to build the bar. You son of a bitch. Did you shame me here in front of all your people, all your fans, all your Patreon?
Everybody listening can build a bar. So, I mean, but it is an interesting question, a serious question about like just friendships, how that changes and stuff. But when you guys stopped drinking and then you stopped also eating animals at some point, like when did that come about and why? And both of you again.
Well, doing a morning television show, so I guess we're on the same slot as, what are the names there? Is it Michael and Kathy Lee or Hoda and Kathy, whoever is on that time, that mid-morning slot after the Today Show is the equivalent of what I do. And at the moment now we've pivoted to COVID, which we can touch on in a minute. So we do a lot of press conferences that happen at that time. But a lot of the basis of what we do is celebrity interviews, fun stuff. And certainly when I first started out, it was a lot of like, this diet, that diet, the Atkins diet, the Miami diet. It was like once a week. And I felt really desensitized to this. And because of drinking and eating really badly when I did drink, recovery with hamburgers and all this stuff, I'd put on a lot of weight. You saw me at that time. I'd ballooned on my frame. And I found I struggled really hard to get that weight off. It was like my metabolism just stopped. And I was only in my mid-30s. So, I was looking at a lot of these diets and going, this is another diet. Okay, cool. Yeah, and, smiling and doing my job. And then one day Dr. Michael Mosley came on, who did the intermittent fasting diet, the fast diet. And he came on and something in my head clicked. And I spoke to him about it off air. And he was like, look, definitely try it. He said, I need to warn you, your taste might change. That may be a thing that happens too. You might decide you start to eat healthier or you might decide to cut things out. And I'm like, sure, doc. But it did. That started to happen as I was doing that. I was cleaning up my food, eating less red meat, and I felt good about that. And then I got a role here in Australia where I played Bobby Darin, and I needed to lose some serious weight, but I also needed to, because he was quite thin and lithe in Suits, but it was also like 28 songs a night. So I needed to, have energy and be able to not get sick. And so how am I going to do this? And a lot of my research was leading me more and more to, vegan athletes and people like, Rich Roll and people like that. And I thought, well, even if I just did that for this period of time and see how that goes and see if I can maintain that, how that goes. So I did it for my health. And now, as you and I could never harm an animal for my own sustenance. And it's been 5 years now I've been doing this. Lisa didn't join me as a vegan until a year later. I think she just got sick of making, multiple meals. And she was like, my food was starting to taste really good.
You could never eat an animal again.
No.
Why? Because you chose it for dietary and health purposes, not for the concerns for the animal, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I did. And I think as you evolve more, you realize that, these are sentient beings that, they don't choose to be eaten. They don't choose to be killed or murdered for my sustenance. I don't judge anybody else doing that. But I have eaten, like I said to people, when people say, oh, do you miss drinking? I'm like, well, I drank all the drinks and I ate all the food. I've eaten bits of body parts that I can't believe I ate, and I've eaten brains and, all that sort of stuff and lamb's hearts. And I've eaten all the parts of the body, most of them.
If you could just hold on a second, I just have to do an ad. The best bacon, the best steak, the best chicken, and the best salmon you'll ever eat won't come from the grocery store. You can only find it on the family farm and caught by independent Alaskan fishermen. That's why you need Moink Box. That's MOINK Box.com. Stop arguing with your friends about politics. Do something. Join the Moink movement and save the family farm. Moinkbox.com/stand up now. I'm sorry, what were you doing? What were you saying?
What I was talking about was animal rights is really important to me. And, they have because I feel like they're sentient beings. They have emotions. They raise children. And I thought, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. So that became more important to me than just my health. Was like, this is what I do now. I don't eat meat anymore. Although I support smaller farms as opposed to industrial farming. Right.
I'm sorry. Just again, I've contractually obligated. Why are 97% of the chickens served in the U.S. dipped in chlorine? Simple. Because Big Food doesn't have the same quality standards as the family farm. That's why you need moinkbox.com/stand up. I got pitched this ad and I don't make choices without you anymore. And so I called you up and I was like, listen, dude, they're paying me a good amount of money to do these reads. And I do eat meat about once a week. It wouldn't be hypocritical. And my issue is more about climate and sustainability. Although you're right. I don't disagree with you or anybody on the rights of the animal and all of that. But you said, and I quote, take that sweet, cold, hard cash. So that's why I'm doing it, because you're allowing for it.
Well, also, it's your choice. I mean, people are allowed to have choice with this sort of stuff, but I would like them to make more intelligent choices. I much support smaller farming as opposed to industrial agriculture, which is ruining our planet. I think smaller farms are really great, and if we could go back to that, that would make our planet even better if you choose to be a meat eater. So I approve. What was that name again, Pete?
It's Moink Box, MOINK. Oink, oink, get your moink.
Is that really their slogan?
There's a thing. Let me find it. There really is.
Oh my God, that's so great.
Where
also,
is it?
I believe that I'm an activist because I choose to do what I do actively. I don't need to stand out the front of McDonald's with a sign saying, don't go in here. Because McDonald's tastes good.
Your kids eat meat sometimes.
Yeah, they eat meat once or twice a week. It's going to be their decision. This isn't a religion. They don't need to be, what we're trying to do is educate them to make better choices in their lives, whether that's through booze, through their education, through people they meet, through their own careers, or through the choices they put in their bodies. So hopefully by the fact that they eat a broader range of food, they eat a lot of vegan meats as well as regular meats, they can go, well, what do I choose to do? And hopefully I'll influence them enough to say, look, if you want a better planet and you want a better lifestyle, you either have to choose sustainable places like you're talking about here or farm it yourself or move away from it.
You get time for like two more big questions?
Yeah, man.
All right. What is it about us and a lot of, other guys, our generation? What do you think is important to share about our relationship and how much we share with each other? And, just in terms of the kind of men that we're trying to be for our kids and our wives. And like, I don't know, you're a good role model and friend. And I like to think I am with you as well. But what is it that we're trying to do to change about men? You write about this in your column. You talk about this whenever you get the opportunity. So I just wanted to give you a shot about what kind of man you're trying to be and what kind of boys you're trying to raise and what type of woman you're trying to raise.
You've got to be in touch with your emotions. I mean, we are raised by generations of people who crushed their emotions, who saw emotions as a weakness. You can see that I know you've spoken about this at length on your podcast and other people's podcasts about people judging Simone Biles, not wanting to, because she had the twisties and can't perform. It's like, well, you should be strong. No, that whole mentality, this machismo of the world is not working for us. And so it's about being more in touch of who we are as men and modeling that, not only for our children, but for each other. And I know that I've had trouble through my anxiety, through cutting off friends like you for a period of time and going back into my shell of, you lose people along the way. And as we get older, it's harder to make friends. It is harder to open yourself up to those friends. So the value add I have in you and I talking 3 times a day outside of this box is vital to me. I process my emotions better talking to you every day. It makes me a better husband to my wife. It makes me a better father to my kids. It makes me better at work. I talk to you about my work a lot. I'm like, oh, this is happening, or how do I gauge this? And I listen to your podcast, and you and all the people you have on influence the way I think. I mean, you know how much I love Wyatt. I love Christian. I love Maura. I love all the guests you have on. Mm-hmm. And they've actually helped me adjust about how I want to put myself out there and be active in my own community. But it's about, I lost probably my best friend in the last 15 years. He took his life a couple of years ago now, out of nowhere. And I saw him 2 weeks before, and I did not know that he was going to do it. And I saw he was texting my wife jokes the night he did it. It's invisible. It's silent. This sort of the thing that takes men away from their families is so silent. And if we could just talk, if we could just cry, if we could just be real, if we could just be allowed and have the space as men have taken up enough space. I'm not asking for that, but having space for our emotions to be
no, you mean
safe,
take,
to be nurtured.
The space that we give each other. I mean, your friend taking his own life was in some ways like his loss, your loss was my gain, because what happened was I lost my job and I was such a wreck, and you were the only person I could feel completely naked and vulnerable to, even before I started being honest with Val about how scared I was. And because he took his life, you know, and whatever that not survivor skill, but the idea that what could I have done for my friend? Like, it was like, you weren't going to let me go down a path, and how many times you peeled me off the ground, and still do. And that's as a result of like losing a friend. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but certainly that was part of it. Like, you weren't going to let me go down that path. And then it, of course, turned into what it has become now. But I feel that way, that was at play there. I came to you and I was like, dude, I just lost my job. I'm devastated. It's over. I'm done. I don't even want to live. I wasn't suicidal, but I was dark as I've ever been. Yeah. And you were just there every single day. Every day. Yeah,
and I was worried. If I didn't hear from you at the time that I thought, I'd wake up in the morning, I thought, Pete hasn't reached out to me, I'd reach out to you. You know, I was so worried about, I didn't think that you would take your life. And I want to reassure Val and your listeners and people out there, you weren't the same as my friend. You were expressing yourself. You were vulnerable. You were in crisis, and you were reaching for help. So I just wanted to make sure that I was consistent and I was there, and that you knew that I loved you and that you had value in my life and that I couldn't lose you.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing, though, because, like, we haven't seen each other. Like, it's all been virtual for 2 years, almost 2 years. And the point, I guess, of that is, like, find a friend somewhere. Find a buddy and do buddy checks and be open and be vulnerable and be completely naked. And what I mean by that is, like, stand in front of the camera with your dick out and show it to your best friend, and then become aroused, because that's really helps. It's not gay or anything. It's just you really help us get closer, I think.
And if you can make money out of that, in some sort of cam society,
I would do that. I'd do a cam.
I would not shame you.
I would do a cam. There's nothing. There's nothing less. That's great. You don't. Who gets hurt? Some guys are going to go on and watch you get naked and play with yourself, and then like drop money into your bank account. Let's go. Let's go.
And you're playing video games at the same time as on Twitch? 100%.
Yep. I've already told the girls about this opportunity.
That's great. They should be so proud.
So I wanted to just have the final part of our conversation today just be about your view on America and American politics and what's the fuck's going on in your country with COVID, because you and I and your wife, Lisa, are, you two pay close attention to American politics, and I wonder if, like, everybody does in Australia, but you know more about what's going on than a lot of Americans sometimes. Of course, you cover this stuff a bit for your own TV show and everything that you're doing down there, but like, anything you want to say about how you see us, and how, by the way, how careful do you have to be with your own personal political opinions, given the nature of the show that you co-host on, one of the major networks in Australia? Like, you're pretty vocal, I feel like. I mean, I know how you feel about everything. Vocal.
I mean, I am left-leaning, maybe sometimes centrist, but mostly left-leaning because of how I act and where I position myself as a person. But, and where I worry about our planet and all that sort of stuff. But as far as this goes, it's about common sense, and it's about listening to the experts. And I think that where the trouble is the most, and why this Delta variant has taken us all by surprise, is that we thought we had this beat. You guys thought, you guys led the way. I mean, with Biden and the vaccination plan, you set goals, you got to those goals. It was clear that by the time you got to July 4th, you were really on track to do what you wanted to do. In the meantime, we were looking around at India that was just absolutely going through hell and losing thousands of lives and people being trapped over there. And we were speaking to families that were losing family members who couldn't get back to bury them or to be a part of their lives because of how deadly and virulent this strain is, this Delta strain. We have had a lockdown policy here in Australia, which is, I guess, depending on how you want to stand, I don't know where I stand. I think history is going to be probably better off describing what the situation is more than me, but the locking down states and stopping people from coming in and out, which, sure, that can help for a certain period of time. And this is not me being political at all. Most people, including the Prime Minister of this country, said we did not have enough vaccines. We did not think that this strain was going to come through. When the opportunity came to buy vaccines, we bought the AstraZeneca vaccine mainly. We did not approach Pfizer too much. We should have had more Pfizer. It turned out AstraZeneca became very problematic with our TGA equivalent here at ATAGI, where they were saying there could be blood clotting, there could be this, there could be that. Don't have it if you're under 60. There was all these rules, and then they started to say, well, the vaccines we're going to roll out in this stage. We'll start with, obviously, essential care, essential workers, people who work with the elderly, vulnerable people, disabled people. But more and more we realized as Delta was creeping over the horizon, we weren't vaccinating fast enough because we did not have the vaccines. So we were caught off guard. We were caught on the back foot. And now, I mean, yesterday we had 291 cases that day of that 24-hour period in New South Wales alone. They've locked down Victoria again because there's been a jump from zero. It was on Wednesday or Thursday this week, maybe even earlier. The premier of that state said 0 on Twitter. It's like 0. Look at us. Now he shut down the state 2 days later, and that's 29, and they don't know if it's contained.
But do you realize how weird it is when I get every one of your polos, when I've told you this, and how you guys are looking at those numbers like, we got crikey, we got 100 great cases here. Yeah. And we're over here going, we got like 200 people died. We got 10,000 cases a day in Florida. That's just in Florida. So, how do you see America, and what do you think the difference is? Like, do you guys have an anti-vax movement that is significant in any way?
Sure. I don't think it's as because our population is nowhere near the size of yours.
How many people
we're
in Australia?
Like 26 million people here in this country as a whole. So there is no way we're actually of the scale of you are, of deaths and stuff like that. So that's why these amount of cases or the deaths that we do have are really significant because our population is so small. Our anti-vaxxers are loud, but they're smaller compared to yours. But they're there. They're loud. And it's, how I look on what's happening with you guys over there, I just feel so sad.
Do you think
I feel sad for you guys as a nation? I live there. I love you guys. My family loves being in America. Mm-hmm. It's one of our favorite places in the world, and I am scared of the loss of life. When I hear about more nurses are wanting to leave Texas and not go back to nursing because this last 12 to 18 months, that's frightening. And there's no one to replace them. And the fact that there's misinformation constantly, including from members of your own government with their bad hair and their little perms, it's insane.
You're talking about Senator Rand Paul, I think. So if you love America so much, name one baseball player.
Barry Bonds.
Wow. Oh, interesting.
How do I say him?
Okay. Football player.
Tom Brady.
Oh, okay, of course. Can you name one American basketball player, not Michael Jordan?
LeBron James.
Okay, all right. Well, sorry. You do love America.
But that's because I've seen Space Jam, so...
fair enough. So I guess my final question about this is, culturally, how do you see it? I see America as having a real cultural issue, not all of us, but way too many of us, of individualism. That's a poison, that's a cancer that I don't care about anybody I don't know. I only care about my family and my friends. I don't really even care about my neighbors. Europe, Australia, I'm sure there's a lot of that. But it's gradations differently, and there's just a difference in terms of the culture. And I think even in terms of the trust in government, your trust in government in Australia and other countries in Europe certainly is much higher. We hate our government. We don't trust it. And we don't even really like each other, apparently. Like, that's the way I see the difference. And where would you push back on what I'm saying about the differences in terms of how you guys are working together better than we are to beat this pandemic, in my opinion, because you're more likely to understand and appreciate certain parts of collectivism and socialism, whereas here in America, that's not respected in a sad way, I think. Do you think there's any...
I think more that we less than trust the government, that we have a healthy criticism of our governments. You know, we want to trust them. We know what they're like, but we're going to push back and criticize. And there's a debate that goes on that's not us versus them, and then it's the game over. Whereas you guys see, it seems to be that certainly the last 4 years through Trump and prior to that, the divide became bigger and bigger and bigger, and that everything was so politicized, and that, well, now we don't trust these people. There's a real us and them over there.
Yeah.
And really, I think that has been more damaging and will, you know, it's costing lives. And that's the sad thing, is that it's costing lives. And I think that whether I like this government or the next government, it doesn't really matter, because I believe that they're doing the best for our country. Are they making mistakes? Should we have got more vaccines? Yeah. Will I criticize them on a daily basis? 100%. That's my job. We're going to look at it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. But I do believe they have the best intentions. Whereas I don't know if you've just lived through this last 4 years, if that is the same case, unless, of course, you are in MAGA land or Trump leaning, thinking, well, yeah, that was good for my economy, so I don't care. Right. And I think it's this whole nature of freedom that, well, we've got our freedoms. Well, freedom comes at a cost. And that cost isn't to you, it's to somebody else. And I think that's, you know, what is so great about the sort of uprising of Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, is that freedom for certain people comes at a cost for others. And we're hearing about the others now. And it's about rearranging what we know as a concept as freedom being, and what it means, and how expensive it is to other people.
Sign up at moinkbox.com/standup. Get a year of bacon for free. Then you pick what meats you want delivered with your first box. You get to change what you get each month and cancel anytime. moinkbox.com/standup. A free bacon for a year, Campbell.
Is this why my kids call you Uncle Meat?
No, but that's one of the most endearing, most amazing. I love it so much. So finally, let's end on a heartier note. You're like a famous celebrity there, but you also interview other famous celebrities all the time. You have had some pretty fun opportunities that you've brought your kids to and stuff. But I would just, to end on a happy note, like, what's a great moment from your career of maybe somebody that you interviewed with Leo, or anything that you did in your career that you never thought you'd get the opportunity to do?
With Leo, we did the red carpet of Thor Ragnarok here in Australia. And so as a school assignment, I got him to write the questions out. He would have been, 4 years ago? So he would have been 8. And he dressed up in a suit and he got on the red carpet. We had a camera crew. Yeah. And I'd met Chris a couple of times.
Chris Hemsworth, Thor.
Chris Hemsworth. Yeah, Australia. I met him a couple of times, just not personally, just like, oh yeah, we met and knew each other.
Don't you have Australian celebrity circles? Don't you all hang out together?
I just interviewed him on a couple of junkets, and he and I had done a TV show here. He did Dancing with the Stars in Australia long before he was Thor, and I'd done that too. I think I did it the year before him, and so we'd met around that time as well. So I knew he was a good guy, and so I knew he would be great with Leo. So Leo interviewed him, Taika Waititi, Mark Ruffalo, and I'm the one that grew up with Marvel Comics. I'm the nerd here. They were the ones I wanted to interview, but I just stood back and just watched this 8-year-old boy really nail these interviews. Tough questions. How heavy is the hammer? But what was funny about that is that straight after that, my dad came over, Taika Waititi came over on the red carpet. It was really fun. And then I thought the funniest moment was the foreign minister of Australia at that time was and still is a very elegant, smart woman called Julie Bishop. She's now no longer the foreign minister, but she was coming down the red carpet, and Leo's like, who's this person? I'm like, this is Julie Bishop, the foreign minister. And so we just interviewed her. Just like, hello, what's your name? And she was just great. And so that sort of stuff. And the fact that all those people knew me and just ignored, they were like that. They didn't want to see it. They just looked at my son and just were just into him and were so generous. That's my best. Of all the things I've done, honestly, that's the best.
Thank you for talking to me. I appreciate it very much. I love you. And I don't know. This is awesome. Thank you.
Love you too, pal.
There you go. David Campbell of Australia, everybody. You should definitely follow him on Twitter. And he's great on Instagram and TikTok as well. I'll have all the links in the show notes, and I would love it if you said hi to him and tell him how much you enjoyed him joining the podcast. He's on Twitter at David Campbell 73. And he's also written a couple children's books. I forgot to mention them and talk about them, but he wrote them inspired by both his kids. So I'll have all the links for that in the show notes. All things David Campbell. I'd love for you to support him. All right, so that is Stand Up Light for today. Thank you very much for listening. I'll have a new guest tomorrow. I don't know the schedule yet, so I wish I could preview it, but I haven't even figured that out yet. I am producing it all on my own, of course, so figuring it out. But thank you for listening today, and look forward to having you back tomorrow. While I'm on vacation, I'll keep putting these conversations out each day, unique, interesting ones. Hopefully, if you appreciate them, and thank you very much for listening. No hangout this week, of course, but I'd love for you to sign up if you haven't. It'd be great to see new subscribers signing up while I'm on vacation. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick or just click on the paid subscription link in the show notes. That's it for me. Love you guys. Thank you very much for listening. Take us away, John Carroll.
You better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.